Hey everyone! So before this whole pandemic thing started, I wanted to teach you guys how to make sourdough bread. Unfortunately, I can't get you a starter unless you're local. I could leave it outside for you, but I'll post a link in the description of where you can buy a starter, and I'll show you a quick, simple process of how I feed it, maintain it, and how I make bread. So I have a starter that's from a woman in Atascadero. It's over 100 years old, and that just means the yeast is naturally been fermenting and used for over 100 years. So to feed it, I don't measure anything, I just go off of consistency, and I like to use organic flour. I'm just gonna put a couple scoops in, and I do have some water that's warm. It's only about 80 degrees or so, and I just mix it until it's the right consistency. Some people have a thicker starter, some people have a more liquid. I would say mine is more pancake batter. So I just kind of add a little of each until it's the right consistency. The sourdough starter recipe that I use for my bread only calls for ½ cup of starter. So for me, it's not really necessary to have a huge container of starter ready to go. So I just feed it as needed when I'm going to bake. And when I'm not baking, I leave it in the refrigerator. So that is about the consistency I usually like. It's, I'm gonna add a little more flour. A little too liquidy. And I like to use a chopstick. The sourdough starter can be reactive to metal, so you want to try to use something that's wood versus like a metal spoon or a metal utensil. So this is actually perfect. It's pancake type batter, and the next step is you want to keep it in a warm place. And just to demonstrate how much this will rise, I'm gonna put a rubber band around our starting point. And I keep this in the oven with only the light on. I don't turn the oven on because it can get too warm. And I have had this overflow a couple times. So now I put it on a plate and the lid is loose. And we'll check back in a few hours. Depending on your temperature of the room, it really depends on how fast your starter is gonna rise and eat the gluten up. So we'll just check back in a couple hours and let you guys know how it goes. So it's been about 2 hours, and I'm sure you guys are excited to see how the starter looks. So after about an hour of it in the oven, the light was a little too hot, so I turned off. And look. Mabel's very happy. So you can see we've doubled in size. And what you're wanting is lots of bubbles, kind of a spongy, bubbly consistency. So this is perfect. We are able to make the dough and go to the next part. So a little trick in case you're not sure if you've waited too long to use your starter, because it does have a window. It'll proof, which is what it's been doing, eating the gluten, and it'll double in size. And then over a few hours, it'll start to collapse once the gluten's gone. And at some point after it's been collapsing, you won't be able to use it. It just won't rise. So a little test is to just take a scoop and put it into water, and if it floats, you are still good to go. So we're gonna use this starter. I had some extra on the side because I knew I'd have to make some extra loaves today. I have a few neighbors who need bread. So we have a lot more starter. And the recipe I use, I'm gonna actually double it for all the bread that I'm making tomorrow. But it is a mixture of white and wheat flour. And I measure out dry ingredients first. It's 1 cup of wheat to 2.5 cups of white flour. Baby loves this bread. It's super good and amazing if you toast it with butter or make a sandwich out of it. And then it's 1.5 teaspoons of salt. So salt and the starter will interact negatively, and this salt can actually kill off the beneficial yeast. So you want to mix in the salt into your flour first before ever adding your starter. And then it's 1.5 cups of warm water. So I'm just gonna use my same cup to my 1.5 line and a 1/4 cup of starter. I just eyeball it. There's not a big deal if you don't measure it out. So stir it well, and I'll show you guys. Hi, Scooter. So I'm just gonna pour it into the middle. Do you want to show them closer? And then mix everything well. Again, using a wood spoon. So right now I haven't doubled the recipe, but I just want to show you guys how it will look like with a single serving. And I make 1 loaf a week. It's good for my husband and I. We don't eat too much bread, but it's really good for like breakfast and sandwiches and stuff. And then once you start getting to where it's a little too sticky and it won't mix with a spoon, then start using your hands, and you're just gonna smooth and fold it in until all the flour is mixed together. You can kind of punch it a few times. It's actually very therapeutic. I love making bread. And it's really fun, especially when you can like share it with people and your neighbors and family. All right, so this is pretty well mixed together. So we are going to let this sit in the oven. It's still warm from the starter rising, and it's gonna sit for about 12 hours. So I usually do this at night, wake up in the morning, and then you're ready to bake. I have a beeswax cover that works great. It just needs to have a seal. I've used cloth in the past, but I feel like it kind of dries out the top. So I like to use this, but you can use whatever works for you. So this guy is going in. I'll probably turn the light on for about an hour and then turn it off before I go to bed. So we'll see you guys in the morning. Hey, welcome back to part 2 of sourdough bread making. So last night we put our dough in the oven with just the light on for about an hour, and it's about 13 hours since we made the dough. And if you take a look, you can see how amazing it is. It rose, it doubled in size, and after the video I actually added a second batch to this, so this is 2 loaves of bread that have doubled in size. So you want to have a nice clean countertop to work with, and I floured it to prevent the dough from sticking. And you can just dump it out, give a little scoop with your hands, and it smells amazing. Just try to get everything out as best you can. towards the bottom. Okay. So I'm gonna put this in the middle of my flour surface and dust the top with flour. You can also rub it on your hands just to prevent sticking. And you just wanna smooth it out, fold it onto itself. There isn't really a pattern or way, you just wanna fold it a few times. And since this is a double batch, I'm going to separate it into half and put that aside. And you only need to fold maybe like 2 or 3 times, just enough to where it's mixed together. You have a little bit flour on all the surface to prevent it from sticking. And the really important part is consistency. So you're looking for dough that is elastic. So when I stretch it, it should bounce back. It should automatically come back together. So this is perfect, elastic, stretchy dough. And it is going to rise beautifully in the next step. So now the goal is just to shape it. If you want to make a bread loaf or just a circle loaf, I usually do circle loaves and they come out really well. It's therapeutic to smush the dough. All right, so I'm gonna do my last fold just to get it into a kind of roundish shape. Pulling the dough together. It doesn't have to look perfect. I'm just trying to work out the little creases that it develops by kind of bringing it back into itself. So that's gonna be the bottom. This is gonna be my top. So you can either leave it here and covered with a tea towel, or you can put it in a proofing basket. So I started off without a proofing basket, and either way works fine. If you do use the baskets, I like to coat the inside with cornmeal. This just prevents the dough from sticking inside. And you want to put it face down. It'll make a nice, beautiful loaf. And then cover it with its little cloth and just keep it in a dry, warm place for an hour and a half. And then it will have risen, and it's not going to double in size, but it's going to get a little puffier. And then it'll be time to bake. So stay tuned for the next video. Welcome back for the last phase of how to make sourdough bread. Our dough has been rising for an hour and a half now after we did some folding and took it out of its proofing phase overnight. So in the proofing baskets, you can see it's risen a little bit. It's still nice and soft and fluffy. We are going to gently plop it onto this hot cloche, and you can kind of wipe off the cornmeal a little bit. What we're going to do here is take a little blade. If you don't have a dough cutter, you can just use a regular blade. And the goal is to make enough cuts so that the air can release and the steam can release, helping the dough to rise versus flatten out. So it'll rise up while it's baking. If you want to get super fancy with it, you can Google lots of pretty designs online, and people spend like hours detailing their dough. I don't really have the time for that, but it usually turns out pretty, even if you do like a little star design or whatever. You do have to slice it kind of firmly and push down, and I feel like that gets the best cut if your dough is too sticky, sometimes it won't slice completely. So for baking your dough, you have two options. You probably have more, but for me, I have two options. I have the cloche, which has a dome cover. And this is also hot. It's been heating up in the oven. This is from Amazon, and then I have a Dutch oven, which works great too. So we'll put our other loaf in the Dutch oven. And it's not necessary to oil or put anything in these. The bread usually pops out just fine. So I'm going to do the same thing, make our little cuts. Okay. And Dutch ovens come in all shapes and sizes, so whatever you have, or if you go to thrift stores, Amazon, you're bound to find something that's good. I'm a little unsure if this is going to be too small, just because the dough can rise a bit, but I'll keep checking it and it'll work no matter what. My goal is to fit both of these in the same oven to cook at the same time. So our oven's at 500 degrees. And just do so. So these are at 500 degrees for 30 minutes. And after 30 minutes, we'll turn it down to 450 for 15 to 20 minutes and take the lid off. So the dough is already cooked, the bread has risen to the size that it's going to be, and the last phase is just goldening the top and browning and crisping it. And we'll show you the final product. It's been 30 minutes, and I just want to show you guys what the bread looks like. So I've turned the oven to 450, and oh, it looks amazing. So it still has about 15 minutes left. And this one, which I was a little nervous might be too big, actually turned out perfect. So we will let those sit in there for about 15 minutes at 450, and just to get golden brown, and then we'll take them out and they're ready to go. All right, so we are done. Our sourdough is out of the oven, and it looks and smells amazing. You can hear a crackling noise if you go closer. You can hear the bread crackling. Well, we hope you guys enjoyed these little tutorials on how to make sourdough bread and the focaccia bread. We're thinking of doing some more. I can teach you guys how to make English muffins, bagels, tortillas, cinnamon rolls, pretty much a lot of different options. We also might do a little garden series and show you guys what we're planting for this season. So stay tuned, and you can leave a comment if you want to see other videos and have other interests. So we're going to go get these off to our neighbors, and we'll see you guys later. Bye.